Welcome to this explainer. Okay, imagine you're just hanging out with your friends, having a good time, and out of nowhere, someone drops a really heavy question. What does it actually mean to be a good person? Well, you'd probably say it means, not lying, not stealing, treating people fairly. Pretty standard stuff, right? But hold on. What if lying literally saves someone's life? Or what if stealing a weapon from a really dangerous person actually prevents a crime? Suddenly, this incredibly simple question gets completely flipped on its head. Today, we are cracking open Plato's The Republic. And listen, I want you to throw away your preconceived notions right now. Seriously, toss them out. This is absolutely not some dusty, boring, irrelevant text about ancient politics. Think of this as a 2,000-year-old intellectual survival guide. It's a literal mind hack for navigating our modern, chaotic world. We are going to break down how to build a perfect city, right inside your own mind. So to kick things off, let me ask you a direct question. How would you behave if you suddenly found an invisibility cheat code and knew you could never, ever get caught? In Book 2, we get introduced to the legend of the Ring of Gyges. It's basically the ancient, original version of the Lord of the Rings. This humble shepherd is out walking after an earthquake, finds a mysterious gold ring, puts it on, gives it a twist, and boom, he's completely invisible. Now, does he use this magical power for good? Absolutely not. He sneaks right into the palace, seduces the queen, murders the king, and just takes over the entire empire. Socrates' companions use this wild story to pose a really dark question. If you gave one of these invisibility rings to a perfectly good person and another one to a totally terrible person, would their behavior actually look any different at the end of the day? Or is the only reason any of us actually behave just because we're terrified of getting caught? And this brings us to a guy named Thrasymachus. If the Republic was a modern YouTube comment section, Thrasymachus would literally be the original angry internet troll. He just bursts into the conversation to declare that morality is a complete scam. He argues that justice is nothing other than the advantage of the stronger. In everyday terms, he's basically screaming, might makes right. The elites make the rules just to benefit themselves, and if you follow those rules, well, you're just a sucker keeping them in power. He straight up argues that the happiest person in the entire world is the tyrant who breaks all the rules and gets away with the whole shebang. This sets up the ultimate philosophical dilemma that the rest of the explainer has to solve. Socrates has to prove him wrong. So let's dive into Section 1, the cheat code for life. Socrates totally disagrees. He argues that being a just person is inherently valuable. To prove it, his companions throw the ultimate challenge at him. Picture this. On one side, you have the ultimate unjust man. This guy is a total master criminal, fundamentally evil, but he has incredibly good PR. Everyone thinks he's an absolute saint. He's rich, he's loved, he's wildly successful. Then, on the other side, we have the ultimate just man. He is perfectly good, completely honest, but because of some incredibly terrible luck, society is convinced he's a monster. He is hated, tortured, and ultimately executed. Socrates has to somehow prove, and this is a tall order, that the tortured, innocent man is actually fundamentally happier than the celebrated, untouchable villain. To solve this seemingly impossible puzzle, Socrates takes a huge step back to build a perfect city from scratch, right in our imagination. Section 2, inside your tripartite mind. So Socrates builds this perfectly just city, which they call Callipolis. But here's the genius part. He maps its structure directly onto human psychology. The absolute crucial takeaway here is that Plato argues your mind isn't just one solid thing. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a constant daily battleground between three totally distinct parts. First up, you have reason. That's the rational part of your brain that thinks logically and seeks the truth. Think of this as the human or the driver. Second, you have spirit, your emotional drive, your pride, your honor. This is the loyal guard dog or the lion. And finally, third, you have your appetite. These are your raw, unfiltered animal instincts for food, sleep, money, you name it. He represents this as a chaotic, multi-headed beast. You know every time you know you shouldn't eat another piece of junk food, but you really, really want to anyway? Yeah, that is literally your reason battling your appetite. It's like a giant puzzle fitting perfectly together. Notice how seamlessly Plato maps these different parts of the mind to the social classes of his perfect city. Reason maps directly to the guardians, the wise rulers. Spirit maps to the auxiliaries, the brave army. And appetite maps perfectly to the producers, the workers running the economy. Plato defines true personal mental health, and this is what he means by true justice, as a state of perfect balance. Justice isn't just a boring set of laws you have to follow. It's when your inner human, your reason, firmly takes the steering wheel and tames the multi-headed beast of your appetites. And it does this using the lion of your spirit as a loyal ally. An unjust person? They're in a constant state of internal civil war, where the beast has completely taken over the wheel. But what happens when that perfectly balanced perfection begins to rot? Let's check out Section 3, 5 Stages of Decay. Plato doesn't just build a perfect mind. He actually creates a really intense warning system for how society and human psychology falls apart, visually tracking this decline across 5 distinct stages. We start at the top with aristocracy, which in his specific definition means rule by the absolute wisest, that perfectly balanced mind we just talked about. But over generations, if that wisdom is abandoned, society starts sliding down. It drops into a democracy, ruled purely by military honor and pride. Then people start hoarding cash, and it degrades into an oligarchy, ruled by wealth and the rich. Eventually, the poor rebel against all that extreme inequality, leading to Plato's version of democracy. Now, spoiler alert, Plato's take on democracy is highly critical. He views it as a state of extreme, chaotic freedom where impulse completely rules and there is absolutely zero discipline. And finally, out of all that chaotic free-for-all, a smooth-talking champion of the people emerges, seizes absolute power, and boom, you hit the final stage, tyranny. Now, this political decay perfectly mirrors the decay of the human soul, which brings us right back to the tyrant that our troll Thrasymachus praised in the very beginning. The tyrannical soul is defined as a state of total, absolute psychological slavery. The tyrant acts out their darkest nightmares in broad daylight, and because their desires are infinite, kind of like trying to fill a bucket that has massive holes in the bottom, they can never, ever be satisfied. So the tyrant, the guy who seems to have all the freedom in the world and can do literally whatever they want, they are actually a miserable prisoner. They have no real friends, they are completely drowning in paranoia, and their reason is securely locked in a basement while their toxic addictions completely run the show. Socrates really wants to hammer this point home, so he actually busts out a bit of fun pseudo-mathematics. He calculates that the just, philosophical king, the person ruled by reason and wisdom, is exactly 729 times happier than the miserable paranoid tyrant. No way, right? But the point is, the tyrant might look wildly successful on the outside, but their internal life is a living nightmare. What about that tortured, perfectly just man from our earlier thought experiment? Well, he still retains complete control of his inner human. His soul is perfectly balanced, which means he possesses a profound internal peace that the tyrant will never ever know. Okay, so how do we educate ourselves to avoid that terrible decay? That's section 4, escaping the ancient matrix. To explain what true education actually looks like, Plato introduces what is probably the most famous analogy in all of Western philosophy, the allegory of the cave. I want you to think of this as the 375 BC version of the movie The Matrix. Picture this, a dark underground cave. People have been chained there since childhood, physically unable to turn their heads, just facing a blank wall. Behind them is a roaring fire, and puppeteers are walking by holding little cutouts of objects, which cast shadows onto the wall. For these prisoners, those shadows are absolute, unquestionable reality. But then, one prisoner gets unchained. They turn around, and the fire instantly blinds them. They are painfully dragged up a really steep path out of the cave and into the real world. At first, the natural sunlight is absolutely agonizing. But eventually, their eyes adjust. They see real trees, real animals, and finally, they look up and see the sun itself. This painful, step-by-step escape perfectly mirrors our own modern struggles. Let's be real. If you're watching this explainer right now, think of your glowing screen as the cave wall and the algorithms feeding you content as the puppeteers casting fake shadows. True education is the deeply objective truth. So out in the real world, the escaped prisoner looks up at the sun. In Plato's philosophy, the sun represents the form of the good. It is the ultimate source of reality, truth, and beauty, and it's what gives our minds the actual power to understand the universe. But the story doesn't end with the philosopher just chilling out in the sunshine. The ultimate goal, and honestly the duty of the philosopher king, is to stumble back down into that dark, confusing cave to save their friends. And here is the real tragedy of the story. Because their eyes are now totally adjusted to the brilliant light, they can't see the fake shadows very well anymore. The people still chained up in the cave, they're going to laugh at them, mock them, and if the philosopher tries to unchain them, they might even attack them. But a truly just person, they go down and guide others out of the darkness anyway. And this brings us to our grand finale, section 5, the ultimate choice. Socrates concludes this massive, mind-bending thought experiment with a beautiful story about the afterlife. It's called the myth of It's all about a brave soldier who dies, actually sees the afterlife, and wakes back up to tell everyone what happens when our souls have to choose their next life on Earth. In this afterlife, souls are gathered together in a massive meadow, standing right before the fates, and they're drawing random lottery tickets to pick their next reincarnation. The fates issue this really stern warning. The blame is his who chooses. God is blameless. They are telling the souls point blank that they and they alone are completely responsible for their choices. And horrifyingly, the soul who gets the very first pick runs up and immediately grabs the shiny, powerful, insanely wealthy life of a tyrant. It's only after he chooses it that he actually looks closely at the fine print and realizes, to his horror, that he is destined to commit terrible crimes and suffer utter misery. He lacked wisdom, he got totally blinded by the gold, and he ruined himself. But then we see the soul of the clever hero Odysseus. Now, he actually gets the very last pick in the whole lottery. But having learned the profound, undeniable value of a balanced soul through years of long, painful adventures, he doesn't want to be a king. He definitely doesn't want to be a tyrant. He spends hours searching the floor until he finds a quiet, boring, private life of just a totally ordinary person. It had been completely ignored by everyone else. He happily takes it because he knows that true happiness comes from a just, balanced mind, not from external power or fame. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one very direct question to ponder. Which part of your brain is steering the ship right now? Every single day, your mind is a battleground. Are you letting the multi-headed beast of your appetites drag you around just chasing the shadows on the cave wall? Or are you actively feeding the human within, letting reason and wisdom guide your choices? The Republic isn't just ancient history, guys. It is a mirror reflecting right back at us. The life you choose and the mind you build is entirely up to you.
Please like and subscribe.